Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone.
No God heard and helped millions of people murdered in the Nazi concentration camps and gas ovens. Millions of Jews, gypsies, gays, communists, handicapped people murdered. Many prayed desperately to God for help, but no help came. So why would I expect God to hear and help me? Jesus said, not one sparrow will fall to the ground without your Father's will. You are of more value than many sparrows. Are the disasters and atrocities suffered by millions for thousands of years according to God the Father's will? Millions have begged God for help from earthquakes, floods, fires. Millions have begged God for help from tornadoes, rape, family violence. Millions have begged God for help from hurricanes, torture, cancer. Millions have begged God for help from starvation and war. Jesus promised that God will help those who pray. But sadly, it's just not true. I was a very sincere young Christian preacher 56 years ago in Virginia and in Illinois. And for many years, before and after I was a preacher, I prayed to, I preached about, sang about God. I swallowed, I spread, feel good, make believe about my imaginary friend, God. But with the help of many people, I slowly woke up to reality. I was wrong. I apologize. Don't get me wrong, I wish we had a fair, loving, all-powerful, real parent God to help all who pray desperately for help. But wanting that does not make it so. I grew up on our farm in Illinois, 100 miles west of Chicago. I went to a one-room country school, one teacher for grades 1 through 6. And when I was in first grade, at least one time, I sat next to sixth grader Roger Malataka to share a music book. Not enough books for everyone to have one. And I felt a special attraction to tall, dark Italian Roger in this mostly white community. I did not fantasize about sex with sixth grader Roger. I did not know about those wonderful pleasures, male with male. But I felt a special, cozy, at-home magnetism for him. Now, I don't know if Roger, as he grew older, was gay, bisexual, or straight. He moved away. And sadly, I don't know if Roger is dead or alive. When I was 12, teenager David worked shirt-free on our farm, and I was very attracted to him. In high school, when certain male athletes came into the library, the invisible spotlight of my attention focused like a laser on them. I needed them, but they apparently did not feel the same toward me. 2 male-female couples in my high school class got pregnant before graduation. I'm glad I did not have a child to parent, but I envied them for having sex. No teacher in high school, no teacher in college told me many well-known men, past and present, were gay or bisexual, enjoying sex and romance with men. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Walt Whitman, Baird Rustin, Langston Hughes, multitudes more. If you're black or brown or native or Asian, how would you feel if your teachers never spoke about well-known black, brown, native, and Asian people, but only about white people? How would you feel? If you're a woman, how would you feel if your teachers never spoke about well-known women, past or present, only about men? And after I became a sincere young Christian preacher at age 20, I became friends with many teenage Chicano guys in that town. And some told me of girls they liked, they dated. I envied them for having sex with girls. I never had, even though I was older than they were. I had no openly gay or bisexual friends then. I knew several Bible verses condemned sex between men, but the same Bible, sadly, in hundreds of verses, supports men killing men in war. I did not know that millions of men, past and present, have been in love with men and made love with men in passionate romance. Sadly, the same Bible supported slavery, hundreds of verses supporting slavery, and not once in the Bible is there any verse saying all slavery is evil or all wars are evil. Not once. So how can I call the Bible a good book, a holy book? Now, it has some good in it. But as far as a total book, no, it's not a holy book. It's not a good book. I found out years later, even David and Jonathan in the Bible were in love with each other. And of course, I didn't know that as a kid sitting in Sunday school. And later in my 20s, when I was no longer a preacher, I told my mother I wanted to have sex with someone. I assumed it would be with a woman, but who? I'd never seriously dated a woman. And later, when I was back in Albuquerque, I drove from Albuquerque to Juarez, Mexico. I had sex with a woman sex worker there. First time in my life with another human being. But I look forward to this so much. I came before I would have entered her vagina. I was so eager. I had waited for years. How sad that in my 20s, I felt I had to go to another nation and pay a pimp to have sex with a woman stranger. I was not attracted to her, and I suppose she was not attracted to me. To have sex with another human being for my first time. My Spanish was not good. Her English was not good. It was far from romantic for both of us. And later I had sex with a couple women here in Albuquerque. One young woman in Illinois, in the town where I had been pastor years before. And one night at the Latin American Social Club in Sterling, Illinois, I danced with Connie. She said she might not live long. Now, I'm not sure if she meant that or if she was just trying to get my sympathy. She wanted sex with me. I had never before had a woman on the dance floor tell me that, and I was flattered. I knew she was living with a man, so I asked her, well, what about Wally? She said they were liberated. They were free to have sex with other people. So I took a break from dancing and I went and spoke to who was there at the dance, my dear friend Johnny Sotelo, and told him the situation. And I really appreciate Johnny. Sadly, he's dead now. But, I mean, some guys who knew me, and I might have asked, they could have said, you're actually thinking of her, of having sex with her. You were a preacher in this community. You're not married to her. She's living with another man. And then on the other extreme, some guys, if I had told them that there that night, might have said, oh, if you can get a piece of ass, get it. But Johnny very thoughtfully said he thought she was lonely, and whatever happens, happens. I went to her place after the dance. Her boyfriend was not home. She and I had sex, and after sex, while I was still lying naked in their bed, she kept going to the window watching for her boyfriend to come home. And when he came, she went after him. Where had he been? Doing what? With whom? And I was still lying naked in their bed. He came into the bedroom. He saw me. He was probably kind of shocked to see this former young preacher in bed, their bed. I pretended to be asleep. I'm glad he did not yank me out of the bed and start beating on me. The two of them kept arguing, going after each other. And finally, they both went to sleep in other rooms. And as the dawn came, I put on my clothes and left a wiser man. I learned that some people who say they are sexually liberated are not sexually liberated. still hung up on jealousy and trying to cage the other person. Do not be conned as I was. Actually, I was sexually attracted to two of this woman's brothers, but I never had sex with them. And for many years, while my parents were still living, I lived part-time there in Illinois, part-time in Albuquerque. In late 1976, my friends Steve and Cease in Albuquerque told me they wanted to take me to a place I might like. And they took me to a gay bar on Central. And never before had I been in a gay bar. I met a young Chicano artist from Cuba, New Mexico. He and I had sex at my place. That was my first time with any male. I was 31. And soon after that, very soon, I told my mother, and she said she had never known there were gay people in the world. I had greatly feared losing my many straight male friends if I came out gay. And some did back off from me, turn cold toward me. But one of them apologized to me years later. And since that first sex with a man 46 years ago, I had sex with many men, dozens and dozens of men, Albuquerque, Chicago, San Diego, New York City, Madison, Wichita, Peoria, San Antonio, Ohio, and on our Illinois farm. I tasted romance with some men. Bisexual Jose from Mexico, whom I met when he was 23, very attractive, up at the Spence Hot Springs in the Jemez Mountains. I had sex more often with Jose than any other man in my life. 70 plus times. I kept track. I was in love with Jose. But sadly, he got involved with drugs. He was locked up. His green card was taken away. He was sent back to Mexico. Dear Roberto died of AIDS at 31. I chose my plot at San Jose de Armijo Cemetery close to his grave. Roberto was not his given name, but it's the name I called him. My beloved Don died in a car crash at 25. His mother had me in charge of his memorial service here. And never before the death of Don had I suffered the loss of a man I was so in love with. He died in 1989. Roberto died in 1999. Also, another Don from Taos Pueblo, part Filipino and part Taos Indian. David from Michigan. He was the first man in my life I wept sucking his toes. Now, definitely I sucked his cock also, but the first man in my life I wept sucking his toes. We had sex in the beautiful outdoor location of a gay nudist place in August of 1986 in Ohio. And David and I danced together at a street dance in Freeport, Illinois, 6 miles from our family farm. Later that evening, he and I went to Rockford, 30 miles away, and danced together at a Mexican bar, not a gay bar. And no one threatened us. No one attacked us. In fact, I would suppose that some of the men at both places envied our freedom, our balls to do what we wanted to do, regardless who saw us. Often we hold the keys to our own prisons. And before my mother died in 1982, I often told her about my having sex with men. And once she told me she wished she could be a mouse in the corner. She meant to watch me have sex with a man. Sadly, that never happened. I wrote to when I was in Illinois in the 1970s, as I say, I was back and forth between both places. I wrote to my friend here, Patty Quintana, in Martineztown, telling her I'm gay. And she wrote me back a good letter saying she knew I am gay from the first day she met me years before. And when I was here in Albuquerque, I wrote to my friend Lupio Laldi in Illinois, telling him I am gay. And he wrote me back a good letter saying he knew I am gay from the first day he met me years before. Often friends of gay or bisexual persons know years before the gay or bisexual persons come out, if they ever do. I would rather be hated. I would rather be rejected by some people for who I am than be loved by them for living a lie. My mother taught me to tell the truth. She hated lies. She hated bullshit about anything. I treasure my strong sexual and romantic attraction to certain men. Life is too precious to fake. Romance too precious to hide. If you're just coming out, tell adult friends you know and trust who have openly gay or bisexual or trans friends. And if you're under 18 and your parents are strongly against being gay, you may need to wait to come out until you're at least 18 and can move out before you tell them. If all the hundreds of millions of desperately poor people on earth, cold, sick, hungry, homeless, were suddenly able to consume, to pollute, to travel, to eat meat and dairy like most middle income or even lower middle income people in the United States, the Earth's environment and the climate emergency would be far worse than it is now. The American dream is a nightmare disaster for human life on Earth. The American dream is a nightmare disaster for plant life on Earth. The American dream is a nightmare disaster for animal life on Earth. I have no right to much more than I need, while many millions, hundreds of millions worldwide suffer on far less than they need. I enjoy living simply on less than the U.S. poverty level for me as a single person. I enjoy it. And my home is one sunny room, 9.5 by 12 feet, with 6 windows in the house of a friend. I have a garden for food and flowers. I enjoy nutritious food, good health, much walking, other exercise, many friends. Enough. Bastante. Sadly, most people in the United States are constantly bombarded from television, radio, newspaper, internet, billboards to buy stuff no one needs. And they become severely addicted to this crap. Much like growing up in a family where almost everyone is alcoholic. Living healthy, living sober, with no booze in such a family seems weird. I enjoy living simply, less spoiled, less bills, less stress, more freedom. I refuse to be a slave to ads, commercials, corporations for crap I do not need, I do not want. I do not want. Why hog much more than my fair share in our world family of 8 billion sisters and brothers? Freedom is not wanting much stuff I do not need. Freedom is not wanting much stuff I do not need. My time is more precious than millions of dollars. My friendships more precious than mansions full of expensive crap. Booze, junk food, cocaine, meth are all awful addictions. But no addiction is more harmful than craving much more money, much more stuff than we need. Sugar, heroin, guns, cigarettes, sodas are all awful addictions. But no addiction is more harmful than craving much more money, much more stuff than anyone needs. Eating crap can cause alcoholism. The nutritionist Roger Williams proved that not enough nutrients causes alcoholism. In experiments with rats, only 10% of those with full nutrition became alcoholic. And when nutrients were cut by 1/3, about 33% of rats became alcoholic. And when nutrients were tripled for supernutrition, only 1% became alcoholic. In another study on people who smoke and booze, when they received supernutrition, an amazing 80%, 4 out of 5, stopped smoking, stopped boozing without even trying. And Dr. John Douglas found that booze and cigarette addictions went away when those patients ate only raw foods. No willpower needed, because raw foods tell our body what's good and what is bad for our health. Dr. Joseph Beasley started a clinic for alcoholics in New York City with the highest success rate in the nation. And years earlier, this medical doctor, Dr. Joseph Beasley, was severely alcoholic himself. His own brother, a lawyer, died young from booze. The foundation of Dr. Beasley's own recovery and his treatment program was good nutrition. Read his book, How to Defeat Alcoholism. I eat no crap. I eat no meat, no dairy. I drink no booze, drink no sodas, no coffee. I smoke no cigarettes. I take no prescription drugs, haven't for over 25 years. No street drugs. I eat only healthy raw plant foods plus bee pollen and raw honey. I stopped cooking my food in 1998 because cooking destroys most, not all, but most of the nutrients. We can learn so much from the misery, the mistakes of our loved ones. My mother was my all-time closest friend. My mother and I had many strong arguments. We had many serious conflicts. But no one will ever love me more than she did. Probably no one will ever love me as much as she did. My mother died at 74 in 1982, almost 41 years ago. She enjoyed the TV comedy that had a good message, All in the Family, with Archie and Edith Bunker. My mother loved beautiful, heart-touching music. My mother supported marriage between whites and blacks, but sadly, she did not live long enough to see her oldest grandson, Daniel, marry the black woman, Bonita, and to see their 3 children, now adults. My mother loved to give to other people. Giving was her habit. Giving was her high. My mother taught me to stand up for what is fair and right. And she was glad to see herself in her wheelchair on TV news here in Albuquerque at a protest demonstrating when she was 71, when she was with me for some months here in Albuquerque. My mother expressed her deep feelings, sadness, love, anger. My mother was smart on many things. She was very honest, conscientious secretary in our family's business. She remembered many telephone numbers. And like millions of women, she yearned for passionate romance, but was not in love with my dad, her husband, for most of their 48-year marriage until she died. And when she married at 26 years old, she weighed 98 pounds, lean, very active, physically on the Illinois farm where she was born in that house upstairs, the farm where she lived all her life, the farm where my brother and I grew up. Until I was born, when she was 38, she drove tractors and trucks and milked cows, very active. But at 26 years old, weighing 98 pounds, how could she have imagined weighing 270 pounds in her 50s? At 26, weighing 98 pounds, how could she have imagined having huge legs, some of the largest legs you've ever seen on any woman, filled with fluid because of heart disease, kidney disease. My mother loved children, but she hated having children stare at her huge legs. So she wore long dresses to hide her huge legs. She did not go to doctors for many years. Why? She was afraid they would find cancer. Her mother, my granny, died of cancer in her liver and colon. For my mother in that condition, 270 pounds, with huge legs, walking a short distance became work. I was ashamed that as the years passed, she no longer washed most of her body. She lived miserably in her body. She sat in a chair to sleep, slumped over because her back hurt her bad when she got up if she would lie down at night. Maybe from the kidney disease that finally killed her. For many years, she got almost no sunshine. And sadly, like millions of people, she ate almost no raw greens. Besides many bananas, she ate almost no raw food. My mother and my dad were miserable cellmates in the prison of marriage until she died. And much of the time, it was emotional war. If I had been my dad, I do not know how I could have coped being married to my mother. If I had been my mother, I do not know how I could have coped being married to my dad. I wish they had parted peacefully or had never married in the first place. They might have been good friends if not married to each other. My mother said about my dad and my brother, they think I don't know anything because I'm a woman. And after I told her when I first had sex with any man when I was 31, she feared losing her closeness with me if I would have a long-term lover companion. She had lost her closeness with my brother, whom she loved dearly, when he got married at 20. I have only the one brother, no sisters. He was almost 11 when I was born. My mother was 38 when I was born. And after that, she got fatter and fatter until she was 270 pounds in her 50s when I was a teenager. How did my brother feel seeing his very active, lean mother become so fat, so trapped in her sick body? Because he knew her before. Did he subconsciously blame me because it was after I was born that she began to balloon? Mother deeply loved him and me, and the only poem she ever wrote was about my brother. I don't know if he realizes to this day how much our mother loved him. He's 88. He lives on his farm in Illinois. I don't know if he realizes how much she wanted to stay close to him after he married, to have heart-to-heart conversations, I wonder if he realized what he missed. I never remember seeing my mother run. I never remember seeing her even walk long distances. Now, she was an excellent secretary many years, long hours in the office, often from 8 or 9 in the morning till 6 or 7 or later in the evening, but very little exercise. And the fatter she got, the less she felt like moving her body. For many years, no indoor toilet there at the office. So she held her shit, she held her piss. Very, very unhealthy. I don't know how I would have coped trapped in her sick, fat body. And she hated going to our country church on Easter, seeing other women dressed in new spring clothes. Her body became her enemy, the torture chamber. But in her spirit, she was young at heart, full of life, passionate. I think my mother and dad seldom, if ever, had sex after I was born. She yearned for passionate romance for over 30 years with some man. And like millions, she was starved for hot romantic sex. So sadly, she became severely addicted to sugar shit at night before sleeping. What a poison substitute for passionate, affectionate, romantic sex. And she and I both were severely addicted to slow poison sugar shit. Ice cream, cookies, cake, candy. When I was a kid and in my 20s. But I saw the hell she suffered. I woke up. I changed. I eat no sugar shit. My only sweets are lots of fresh, whole fruit. Lots of fresh, whole fruit. Not fruit juice. We need the fiber. We need the whole fruit. And sometimes I blend it, or if it's soft enough, I can chew it, even without my teeth, that I lost largely because of my sugar addiction as a kid and in my 20s. I also sometimes blend carrots and eat some raw honey. My mother used to tell me when she had me do many things for her that she could no longer physically do. She said, I would not ask you if I could do it myself. And she said, someday, you will understand. I've learned so much from the misery and the mistakes of both my mother and my dad. I have treasured sex and romance with certain men, but I am so glad I never got married to any man and never plan to. How did my mother feel seeing neighbor women walking mile after mile for exercise? Neighbor women gardening, and she not able. I speak about the suffering of people being fat. And I make no apology for that. I don't dance around the subject. I don't just say heavy or overweight. Fat is a horrible affliction. it can lead to dreadful suffering, as I saw firsthand with my dear mother. If I can help anyone avoid getting fat, or if I can help anyone lose their fat and get lean and healthy and to enjoy their body until they die, I'm glad. We can wake up. We can change. I have no desire to get married to any man on earth, no matter how strongly attracted I am to him, how deeply I'm in love with him. And I do not want to add 1 pound of fat to my body. Every pound of fat, more than our ideal, lean, and healthy body weight, puts more strain on our knees, our ankles, our hips, our back, more strain on our hearts, our lungs, our liver, our kidneys. We can learn so much from the misery and the mistakes of our loved ones. And anyone who wants to lose fat will lose fat by eating only raw plant foods, greens, seeds, nuts, vegetables, fruit, no cooked food, no meat, no dairy, no booze, nothing containing sugar or artificial sweeteners. I know of a man who lost 130 pounds by eating only raw plant foods. I saw the tragedy of staying stuck in a marriage miserable for both my parents. I saw the tragedy of my mother becoming severely addicted to sugar as a slow poison substitute for hot romantic sex and romance that she yearned for. In the nation of Norway and Europe, prison sentences are never more than 21 years, no matter the crime committed. Prisoners are treated like human beings who made serious mistakes, but can still change their lives for the better. The head of one Norway prison said, "Treat people like dirt and they will be dirt. Treat them like human beings and they will act like human beings." The open prisons in Norway have prisoners work the land and grow much of their own food. They bicycle across the huge campus to attend classes on many subjects. They're encouraged to think about the job they want when they are released from prison. And near the end of their sentences, they can work outside the prison. There are no cells with bars. We're talking about Norway. We have a hell of a lot to learn from Norway. The prisoners live in dormitory rooms with their own small kitchen, private bathroom, television. The staff are not called guards. And to become staff, they must attend 2 years of classes in criminology, law, social welfare, and ethics. Their expenses for the 2 years are all paid. The staff are trained to have good relationships with the prisoners, to connect with the person behind the crime. Staff members are paid well, receive generous benefits. Even in Norway, the most famous Supermax prison, which is a closed prison, has well-lit hallways, sun-filled rooms, and a large library. The medical department encourages prisoners to be healthy in body and mind. Norway prisons have the lowest rate of released prisoners getting locked up again for crimes they commit after release. The lowest rate. Norway's return rate is less than 1/3 the rate in the United States. The U.S. spends more per prisoner because here prisoners have longer sentences. Prisoners are much more likely to get locked up again because of their crimes after release, and also the growing number of elderly prisoners in the United States. The elderly prisoners can cost up to 9 times more than young prisoners. Diabetes, dialysis, heart problems, on and on. What kind of human being do we want coming out of prison? Someone who now has skills for a job and wants to live a better life? Or someone with no skills for getting a job? Someone who is bitter and hates the world? Treat people like dirt, and they often will be dirt. Treat people like human beings, and they're much more likely to live and act much better. Tom Grissom was a white man who grew up in the state of Mississippi. Born in 1940, Tom became very aware of the evil horrors of white supremacy against black people during slavery and ever since. Tom rejected superstition and religion. Tom was an atheist. And for 15 years, from 1970 to 1985, Tom worked at Sandia Weapons Labs in Albuquerque. Tom worked designing nuclear weapons of mass murder. But he woke up. In 1985, he realized how evil, absolutely evil, his work was at the weapons labs, and he abruptly resigned. Tom got out of the mass murder business. And then for 22 years, he enjoyed teaching at a college in the state of Washington. Tom died last October at age 81. I strongly compliment Tom for making a huge, good change when he quit his 15-year mass murder job at Sandia Weapons Labs. I wish all scientists there would follow Tom's example. I've not traveled outside New Mexico since 1994, almost 29 years ago when I came back from my dad's funeral in Illinois. I've ridden in no car for 21 years. I've owned no car for 43 years. I would not, and I mean this absolutely, I would not keep a car if given to me free and if I were paid to drive it. I ride city buses, but I mostly walk. Healthier for my body, healthier for our very sick Mama Earth. If all our 8 billion sisters and brothers on earth would fly and drive as much as many Americans think it's their right to do, the climate crisis, the Earth's environment would be far worse than it is now. In the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, early 90s, I drove my only car I've ever owned and my parents' cars, and I rode in buses and trains thousands of miles, protests in New York City, Washington, D.C. And I know that when we have loved ones who live hundreds or thousands of miles away from where we live, we want to spend time with them. But the harm to Mama Earth, the worsening of the climate crisis, is the same for every mile we fly or drive if we're going to visit our loved ones in another state or going to a damn gambling casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. Sure, I would enjoy seeing India, Spain, many places in the world. But who in the hell, who on earth gave me the right to travel as much as I want to, the right to travel as much as my money and time allow, in a world where the worsening climate crisis is hell for many millions of poor people around the world? Who gave us the right to make people now and in the future suffer and to kill them from the climate crisis so we can travel thousands of miles for our pleasure? How bad will the climate crisis have to become until most educated liberals here break their addiction to long-distance travel, especially in cars and in planes? How bad will the climate crisis have to become until most educated middle-income, upper-middle-income liberals stop bragging about how many states, how many nations they've traveled to? Long-distance travel, especially by planes and cars, is a deadly addiction, terribly unfair to billions now living and billions to come after us. With much help, I broke my addiction to eating sugar shit, meat, dairy, junk food, cooked food, and with much help, I broke my addiction to long-distance travel. With much help, we can change our ways. We can wake up to live more fairly in our human family of 8 billion sisters and brothers. When will progressive organizations, peace and justice groups, environmental organizations stop having committee meetings and conferences with people flying and driving thousands of miles? What good does it do to leave huge chunks of real estate or even millions of dollars to your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren if they don't have a decent earth to live on? I warmly thank Mark, Eddie, Travis for their excellent help dozens of times running the cameras and the controls for this program, and thanks to all of you watching. If you or someone you know want me to speak about any of the things I talk about on this program, speak to a class or gathering in someone's home, and of course, totally free, no charge, just stop and tell me if you see me at an event or walking on the street here in Albuquerque. I love personal questions. To your health, my fresh piss.
Shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on.